Thank you very much for joining us on PM Express. My guest tonight is a man who speaks for the entire government. I don't envy him at all because anytime there is some bad press, no matter how difficult, he must find the answers. He must face the media and provide answers. But recently, what he's tried to do is to coordinate with the rest of the ministries and government to provide regular updates on key developing issues. And as you know, we are talking in the context of the 2026 budget that has just been presented and being debated on the floor of Parliament. He himself is a member of Parliament. He's a member of Parliament for a constituency that I struggle to always pronounce the full name, Abra Sebu Kwamankese. I believe I scored 100% this time around. You know him, Felix Kwakye Ofosu. So I'm grateful. The last time I was here, when I attempted to pronounce it, he had to, help me one of the areas.
Well, you got it right.
This time,
so you scored 10 out of 10.
10 out of
and I'm
10.
sure they will be pretty excited in the AK right now.
So that's the MP for the area, but he also speaks for the government. Your job is a thankless one because as it is, when anything happens, you're the man whose face is going to be on whatever has happened. But you find a very interesting way of dealing with this by getting your colleagues to sort of coordinate a certain response. Why was that important? I see that you've tried to centralize the communications. Although yes, the ministers speak, but they speak because you coordinate it.
Well, it's best to hear from the horse's own mouth. Except that in doing so, there must be some coordination. There's the tendency, or if you like, the temptation to speak at cross purposes when you're in government, because one part of government may not know what the other part is doing. And it tends to confuse the public and creates credibility problems for the government, even if the various disparate interventions are well-intentioned. To the extent that they contradict each other, it creates a problem, even if each side may be telling some truth. So it helps to have a coordinated approach where everything is done through a central spine, so that every part of government is aware of what is happening. And therefore, the information flow is seamless, and that what the public gets is exactly what the situation is. So that is what I've tried to do. It is not an easy thing to do, but I think that over time, we are beginning to master it.
I mean, you have senior colleagues in government who have been in government and politics way longer than you have been. They'll see you as young. You recently started the game. You've been in there, but comparatively to others. How are you able to basically say, you have to come through a central pool that I control before you put your message out there, when they would want to do their own thing? I mean, they don't need permission from a Felix Kwakye Ofosu before they do, but you want things structured and formalized to prevent, as you said, conflicting narratives on an issue. How are you able to juggle that?
Well, I think, thankfully, I've enjoyed the fullest extent of cooperation from my colleagues, irrespective of age or experience or longevity. I guess that we all understand that we are working towards one goal, and that it's best to work together, to work as a team, and not individually. That way, we are able to achieve more. So it has been good. We've also learned from the past. I may be young, but I've been around for some time. So I've served in this capacity before, albeit as deputy to the late Dr. Manibuama. So there were lessons that we drew from what happened in the past. And as we've gone along, we try to let what we do reflect those lessons that we've learned. And it's not been easy, but I think that thus far, it's been quite successful.
Does it help that you have a president who actually made his name in communications?
Absolutely, absolutely. And he's very engaged. He takes an interest in what we say, what the perceptions about government are. So every now and then, he touches base to find out exactly what is happening. So it helps. He himself has tons of experience in managing government communication. So I benefit a lot from his input, his insight, and the depth of understanding that he has in this area. So it is quite a blessing and fortuitous for me that I have a boss like that.
Has he coached you before on this matter?
Oh, I think that in my younger years, he took interest in me and tried to mold the way that I engaged. He always stressed the need to be civil. He stressed the need to be patient and calm and respectful of the audience. And every opportunity he gets, he urges my colleagues to cooperate with me so that together we can shape the way that government information is disseminated.
One of the biggest challenges for any government spokesperson is the budget.
That is true.
It is your primary policy document. The 2026 one has just been presented. The minority has a narrative as far as that is concerned. They say it is empty. There's nothing new. You're just leveraging the hard work they did in 2024, and you're riding on the back of that, taking all the credit, but none of the pain.
Well, they say the devil is in the detail, don't they? We've had a turn as well to debate the budget. I myself took my turn as the fourth speaker for the majority on Tuesday last week. And I made a point about where we have come from. I established clearly, as did many of my colleagues who spoke before and after me, that the NPP, now in minority, left the economy in a bad state. I mean, we all attest to it. The hardships were real. The economic indicators were pointing south. The period between 2021 and 2024 were some of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, in the lives of many, many, many Ghanaians. We defaulted on our debts as a country in 2022, 2023. The cedi went into a nosedive, free fall. It depreciated by as much as 27% last year. This year, it's appreciated by 34%. Inflation was going through the roof. At a point, it was 54%. When we took over, it was 23%. Now it is single digits. The finance minister is confident that it will go to 6.5% by the end of the year. The cedi continues to gain strength. It has led to reductions in the price of goods and services, even if more can be demanded. I don't think that any truthful assessment of the two governments can seek to apportion credit to the government that left our economy in the state that it is. That they describe it as empty is not surprising. You would expect the opposition to say something, but I think that any objective assessment of this government so far and what we have said in the two budgets, which will clearly indicate that we are on the right path. I think that what has defined the performance of this government is discipline, fiscal discipline. I mean, even in our own lives, if you live beyond your means, you're always going to be in debt. It is trite. Everybody knows that. The problem of the MPP, admittedly, governments before them have also had that problem, was that they were indisciplined as far as the fiscal management of the Ghanaian economy was concerned. They spent far more than we could afford as a country. They ended up bankrupting us. So we've drawn useful lessons from that. The finance minister has kept it tight. He has shown discipline. If you look at the budget, you find that the finance minister reported some revenue shortfall, but there were corresponding cuts in discretionary expenditure. That is expenditure that you can live without. Whereas there were significant improvements in the way that resources flowed into the critical areas of the economy, the social sector, for instance, education, health, agriculture, what have you. Look at the disbursements to the common fund. And I made a point in Parliament. And you mentioned Abu Asebu Kwamankesi, so perhaps is the most useful example to cite. I was in the constituency over the weekend. Between Friday to Sunday, I toured a number of projects that were being undertaken. There's a place called Nyamedom that has a brand new sizable chips compound that is almost done. There's another one at a place called, what do you call it, Ohiaba. You go to Chiku, you go to places like Mpro and other places. You find that there is significant development ongoing. The Abu Asebu Kwamankesi District Assembly, of which I'm an ex-official member, if you compare their common fund allocations between last year and this year, last year, all they got for the whole year was 298,000 Ghana cedis. By the middle of this year, by the second quarter of this year, they had received 6.5 million Ghana cedis from the finance minister. And that is how come they're able to do all these projects that I've cited. Indeed, I have seen some districts that have received as much as 30 million Ghana cedis, when only last year they got less than 300 or 500,000 Ghana cedis. So you see significant improvements. Take the education sector, for instance. Take free SHS. When was the last time you heard of any significant noise?
But only
complaints about free SHS?
The facts bear you out as when it comes to the economic positives. There are a lot of them. Inflation is down to 8. GDP is growing. cedi has been strong against all trading currencies. Sure. But surely, won't you credit the MPP for laying the foundations at least?
What foundations? So look at their record. Last year, they missed all the targets that the IMF set for them under the IMF program. Now, when you miss your targets by the margins that they did, how can you claim that you've laid a foundation? What foundation can lead to such serious slippages? For instance, when they entered the IMF program, the IMF and the NPP agreed that the main anchor of the program was the primary balance, which essentially looks at your revenue against your expenditure minus interest payments. That if you were not servicing your debts, what would have been the difference between your revenue and expenditure? In the IMF documents and the targets that they set for last year, they said they would do a surplus of 0.5%. In other words, when you take out interest payments and you do a straightforward assessment of how much came in and how much was spent, there will be a surplus of 0.5%. They ended up doing a deficit, which is a primary balance of negative 3.5% or so. That is a major slippage. It cannot be a good foundation. Look at the inflation targets they set. They missed it. All the targets they set, they missed. The deficit was higher than they projected. Now, the contrary has actually happened under us. In the 2024 budget, we set the same primary surplus. The finance minister said he would do 1.5% primary balance or surplus. When he came to read the budget 2 weeks ago, he announced that as of the third quarter of this year, he had actually achieved 1.6% primary surplus. Look at inflation. Inflation is now single-digit 8%. Look at the performance of the currency, as you yourself has highlighted. So the claim that there was some foundation that we were building on is neither here nor there. The DDEP, you see, they had worked themselves into such a corner that they could simply not pay our debts. For that reason, they declared domestic debt exchange, which was only a euphemism for debt restructuring. What they did is that they told bondholders, about 1.3 million of them, that the interest payments that they had agreed with them were going to be slashed significantly. And then the principal payments were going to be deferred for much longer than had originally been agreed on. Ghanaians who endured this went through pain. And you saw how every now and then pensioners would troop to the finance ministry to demand payment and protest and all that. It hasn't happened, I mean, in my lifetime. I have never seen anything of the sort since I was born on this very
But those
soil.
were painful decisions.
Yes, but Evans,
that needed to be taken.
Yes, but,
so that in
but the cost of that,
you benefit
you see,
from
no, you see, there's no benefit
the
anywhere. Evans, there's no benefit anywhere. If through mismanagement, pure waste and recklessness, you put yourself in a situation where monies that you've borrowed from people, you cannot pay back, and you put those people through pain. People went through, indeed, they essentially wiped out the entire middle class of Ghana, because they were in the majority of those who had purchased bonds from the government of Ghana. They literally wiped out the entire middle class. Now, that is a steep sacrifice for people to make. So when they refer to that as a foundation, I don't know exactly what they are talking about.
But whereas you
in any event, Evans, and I might add, it was the only way that they could get IMF support, because the IMF would not touch them with a long pole. And indeed, right after the 2020 elections, it was clear that they had to go to the IMF. They refused for whatever reason. They insisted that they were not going to go. Indeed, President Akufo-Addo is actually on record to have vowed that there will be no financial haircuts, but it happened. You see, so it is pain that they put the people of Ghana through. They cannot possibly seek to take credit for what is clearly the harshest economic policy in living memory.
But whereas you will not give them credit for at least laying the foundation, I find in the budget that you actually did so. I see that in paragraph 757, the budget says, quote, over the past 2 years, we have made remarkable progress in restoring debt sustainability. By end of 2024, 93.5% of Ghana's total debt had been successfully restructured. That is your budget, giving credit to the NPP for making remarkable progress in restoring debt sustainability. Actually says by end of 2024, MPP were in power. 93.5% of Ghana's total debt had been successfully restructured. That delivered the pain to us, but gave you the benefit. Hence, you acknowledge it in your budget.
First of all, our debt should not have gotten there in the first place. So if you mismanage our economy and leave us with a debt burden through which you cannot emerge unless you subject millions of Ghanaians to the pain that they went through under the DEPP, you cannot claim credit. This is acknowledging
it
is acknowledging the fact that
progress.
so in order to do the DDEP, they have to engage investors, or if you like creditors, both domestic and external, those took some time to negotiate. So by the time that the minister was drawing up the budget, a series of things had happened. They had been successful. But the foundational point that I seek to make is that whereas it sounds nice on paper, written in impeccable English, the real issue is that millions of people had to suffer for this to be up. That paragraph that you read essentially has been written with the blood of people.
Yes.
You know,
but at
literally.
least you acknowledge, I mean, the government acknowledges that there was this amounts to remarkable progress, and you say it is successful restructuring.
But of course,
that
it
delivers
simply means that you
the
have successfully engaged your creditors to tell them that they should let go of what was due them. Now, letting go is not easy.
But this is foundation. This
Absolutely.
is acknowledging the foundation.
But that is essentially what this paragraph is saying.
Yes.
Is that the process to engage the creditors, to let go monies that were due them, monies that they were promised, which was going to impose huge hardships on them, has been successful. That's what that paragraph means.
But that is an acknowledgement that the MPP laid the foundation.
But they didn't have any choice other than that. I'm sure that if they had a choice, they wouldn't choose that option. They didn't have a choice. They had worked themselves into a hole. There was no way out. In fact, when they went to the IMF made this a conditionality. The IMF, indeed, if you go back to one of the lectures that President Mama delivered at Kempinski Hotel, in that speech, he stated that the way that he was analyzing the Ghanaian economy and the debt burden pointed to debt restructuring as the only way out. President Mama said this, I think, a year before they even went to the IMF, and the IMF insisted that they should do this sort of thing. So it was clear anybody who had any knowledge about the economy and the way that it had been mismanaged knew that this was going to be the outcome.
But you did not inherit a hopeless economy.
No, but the point is that they had put us through hell.
That is a fact.
But when you sink, the only way you can go is back up.
But they went a long way in repairing the damage that
Evans,
was done.
what option did they have? You see, the other option was not to do that and have the Ghanaian economy totally collapse. So if you are left with these choices, which one are you going to choose? It's not like they, on their own, suomoto, decided that they were going to do this. They were compelled to do this by virtue of the outcome of the mismanagement that they supervised. That's what that it was.
But you agree with the narrative that says theirs was a remarkable progress.
No, but what remarkable progress?
But that's the
language.
That's the language of the budget.
I have told you
that theirs was remarkable in restoring debt sustainability.
Yes, so remarkable progress in engaging creditors to let go monies that are due them. That is what that statement means. In any event, it was the IMF that intervened. The IMF held their hands and went to creditors and begged them to let go of what was due them. That's what had happened. Indeed, that was the whole nexus, the whole foundation, everything that underpinned the IMF deal was this. If this hadn't happened, there was no way the Ghanaian economy wouldn't collapse.
And what's your response to those who would pick up on what you said and say, but you're also so operating within the broad IMF framework?
Sure.
You can't necessarily operate outside it. And whatever success you've chalked is because of the framework that you inherited.
Evans, I've told you.
Challenge you to point to one groundbreaking policy that you've implemented this year that has delivered the positives. Apart from, of course, cocoa, the commodity prices.
Evans, so I'll come to that presently. First of all, the IMF was here when the MPP recorded the fiscal slippages I've spoken to you about. Indeed, they were in the very first year or second year of the IMF program. When they recorded the slippages, when they slipped on the primary balance, they slipped on the, the rate of inflation. When the currency knows that, the IMF was here when the currency reached 17 cedis, close to the elections or shortly after that. The IMF was here. Were they not? The IMF was here when inflation was 23%. So the IMF's presence alone will not result automatically in improved economic performance or management. It is the discipline to do what the IMF even recommends that makes the difference. And that is what this government has that the MPP did not have. Again, this claim that we've not implemented any policy, even if we were to set aside the more serious matters that need to be discussed, I'll get into it very seriously, very, very presently, and stick to that claim. So if not implementing a policy, any major policy, can result in such remarkable economic performance, who needs any policies? You know, but that's on the lighter side. The more serious point is that nobody who has looked at the management of the economy in the last few years can say that there's no policy. There's a policy of fiscal discipline. Indeed, the president has stamped his authority on the government and made it clear that he is not going to countenance any fiscal indiscipline. The finance minister has told you, and indeed he was on your show the very evening that he read the budget. He's told you about the committee authorizations that he is enforcing. You simply cannot commit the government of Ghana without getting express authorization from the finance minister. All of us are complying to a fault. None of us is able to do anything without express authorization from the finance minister. So the very fact that the finance minister and the president are enforcing fiscal discipline is a major turnaround in terms of policy. The second point, you raise the issue about the gold board. Yeah. Now, everybody knows that one of the biggest problems that the Ghanaian economy has is the frequent and rapid depreciation of our currency. Indeed, it is at the heart of the cost of living crisis because we are significantly import dependent. So any attempt to address that is a major policy win. So we came in and noticed that people were exporting gold that didn't go through any formal channel, that we didn't know of, and that the funds that should be realized do not come to this country. Indeed, at the last check, about $8 billion had come in through the operations of gold board alone. All the Bank of Ghana does is that they take monies from commercial banks. They give to the gold board to purchase gold. The gold board then purchases the gold and exports it, and then brings in the forex and gives it to the Bank of Ghana. The Bank of Ghana gives some to the banks who asked for it in the first place and whose monies they take. Now, this is an innovative policy that ensures that the gold board keeps track of the gold that is produced in Ghana. They do their saying and are able to determine the quantities and control how those quantities leave our shores, and then control how the forex comes in. That is how come the Bank of Ghana has been able to build their reserves, such that now their reserves exceed $11 billion. They've even exceeded the IMF threshold, which requires that we add about $1.4 billion or so.
But isn't that only
to the forex?
Gold prices on the world market is record high. In fact, just today it's gone up again. 4,000.
Well, it helps that gold prices is high. But if you don't have the policy framework to harness that opportunity, it's not the first time that the gold price has gone up. But because in the past we didn't have full control about the gold that left our land, we didn't benefit from this windfall. So it is the policy underpinning that has ensured that we have made the gains that we are making. So I hear the MPP talk about policy. It does appear to me that
on gold, but quickly respond to this for me. Over the weekend, I don't know if you've seen it. I'm sure you're monitoring me. I brought it to your attention. Professor, very renowned educationist, Stephen Adai, is on record to have described the gold board as legalizing Galamsey, and that the fact that you're buying from small-scale miners that you can't distinguish which is small-scale and which is legal mining itself makes the gold board an accomplice.
Well, that is mere speculation, regrettably, from the good old professor. He himself hasn't provided any basis. He hasn't provided any evidence. He hasn't shown us any proof of the claim that he's making. The gold board has consistently refuted this claim that, strangely, some MPP people do make.
But Prof is not. I mean, Prof is a very respected.
I'm not. Yeah, we've disagreed with Prof on a number of cases. I think that there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with him, despite the respect that we hold for him. But on this one, he has not provided any evidence. He's only speculated the same way the MPP has speculated. The gold board has insisted that they don't go and buy gold from any Galamsey. They buy from licensed small-scale miners. Small-scale mining is a lawful activity. The laws of Ghana allow individuals to engage in small-scale mining. They are licensed to do so. And that is where the gold board buys the gold from. So there's no policy to purchase gold from any Galamsey. All those who say that are people who are engaging in speculation. And in respect of the MPP, they do that because they think that they must throw some mud at the success that the gold board is trucking, at the success that we have achieved in ensuring that the currency appreciates, something that they could not do for all the period that they were in power. In any event, they themselves bought gold, did they not? They claim to have left 30 tons of gold at the central bank, don't they? So where did they get that gold from?
Well,
in any event, the gold board.
The policy of the large-scale mine.
No. Yes, but that policy still remains. Indeed, more large-scale miners.
Are you taking it further?
No, yes. Now, more large-scale miners sell gold to government than they did under the MPP, and then we buy gold from small-scale miners. And I've been stressed here all day, Evans, that small-scale mining is a lawful activity. So buying gold from a small-scale miner is not unlawful. It is not Galamsey. But the point I seek to make is that some of these claims are not borne out by any concrete evidence. People are engaged in speculation. It does appear to me that there are people who are worried about the success that the gold board is structured. Otherwise, I don't see how.
But here's the thing, though.
They can sustain such arguments when they themselves don't come
to
to the
illegal
table with
money
any
as a
evidence.
substantive subject,
Sure.
because I know NIMOS
Yeah.
and you've been very instrumental in publicizing the work they're doing. But on this matter, the illegal miners are mining gold. We know they are because the evidence of NIMOS itself shows that it's happening. You've blocked all routes for smuggling. In fact, that's part of the mandate of gold board. Of the gold board. You've actually trained people to track that.
Yes.
So there must be an incentive to sell mine gold illegally because you have to find a buyer for it. So who is buying the illegal mine gold?
Well, there's also hoarding. If you have a commodity that you can't sell, what do? You hoard it, you hide it. But as far as I'm concerned, nobody has brought any evidence, as we speak, that gold board has gone to buy any gold from any Galamsey. It is all speculation, baseless claims by persons who are unprepared to furnish us with any evidence. The evidence, as we know it, from the perspective of gold board, is that they buy from licensed small-scale miners. Miners that the state of Ghana has licensed, some of whose licenses, indeed, I dare say, almost all of whose licenses were awarded them before this government came to power. In any event, gold board didn't exist barely 10 months ago, did it? And yet Galamsey was still rife. The Galamsey not okay under the MPP. Indeed, I recall how on many occasions you lamented the effects of Galamsey on your program and your station. Your station has actually been at the forefront of leading the fight against Galamsey in the media. Not so. So the gold board didn't exist under President Akufo-Addo, and yet there was Galamsey. So how can anybody suddenly attribute the prevalence of Galamsey to the gold board? It's not a tenable argument for me. And I think that people who want to engage must do so on the basis of concrete proof and evidence. At this stage, that is lacking.
Stay with the budget.
Sure.
There's a part of the budget that talks about, you talked about one of the key policy interventions, is just fiscal discipline.
That's true.
The budget says that, and the finance minister was clear, it says one of the key objectives for 2026 going forward is to continue recurring spending by capping non-essential expenditure, such as foreign travel, workshops, and vehicle procurements, and eliminating low-impact programs.
That is true.
This is always difficult for any finance minister to implement because obviously government like to spend. How is this being enforced? And I know you speak for the government. This will affect you too because you.
Oh, it does. I can tell you, at least in this house, the Jubilee House.
How is this being enforced?
It has been enforced to the latter
and observed in government
since we came to power. It's been almost a year, has it not? We are in the 11th month.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. No vehicle purchases have occurred in this house. I use my private vehicle, as do all the other people who work in this office.
Private vehicles?
Absolutely.
But you're entitled to.
Yes, but no new vehicles have been bought. No new vehicles have been bought. Maybe in future, some maybe. But it goes to show you.
But that affects your work.
Oh, it doesn't. Well, Evans, I was driving to your station when I was in a position
That's true.
So I can drive in my car to your station.
But if your car is rickety, it's going to put you at risk.
Well, if I drove that rickety car to your station,
Evans, of the people.
The point I seek to make is that I drove the rickety car to your station when I was in a position. So if I drive it to your station again to do this work that we are doing, it's not a problem. Of course, it helps if the work is facilitated. But I made that point just to underscore the fact that it is sometimes possible to restrain expenditure in order that you don't suffer too much slippages. That if it is necessary, it has to be done. The president announced, for instance, the cessation of the supply of fuel to people in this very house, the Jubilee House, and other government institutions. And indeed, it is significant to the extent that if you analyze the amounts involved, you find that a lot of money is spent in that regard. For instance, the average Land Cruiser takes between 1,500 to 1,600 to fill. And indeed, if you look at my appointment letter, which I can show you if we have some time, it indicates that I'm entitled to a 4-wheel drive and a saloon car as a Minister of State. And then a certain amount of fuel every week. So if I were to be given 1,500 cedis of fuel every week, we can calculate how much goes to fuel a month for me alone. And then how much will be spent in a year, and then the 4 years that hopefully we will be in government. So you find that if you multiply it by the number of ministers and other appointees that you have, it is huge money. But the president has clamped down on it as I speak to you. So
but you're entitled to it.
Yes.
Your appointment letter says you are.
Yes, but Evans,
So
now I am buying my fuel. It has not detracted from the work that I'm doing. It shows you that there are ways to cut waste and expenditure.
But is it sustainable? Yeah,
Why not?
but
If as why not,
is it
why?
sustainable to keep
I don't know. I don't know
enjoying the full
if as,
terms of your contract?
if as the teacher, the nurse, the doctor, the average civil servant, it's not giving fuel. But they go to work, they commute to work every day, and from work every day. They live, they get their job done.
Part of their contract to get
true. That is true. So going forward, we probably are going to have contracts that do not include some of these specs.
But you have a contract that
yes, but at this stage, it is not something that we enjoy. I don't have a 4-wheel drive from the state or a saloon car from the state.
Are you also not drawing fuel from the state?
I'm also not drawing fuel from the state since the announcement was made. Indeed, every week before then, my driver was called to go and receive the fuel. Now, that has stopped. He doesn't draw it anymore. And I have to buy it myself. And I think it is the right thing to do. Evans, I don't think that government appointees have to depend
but how long
all the
will
time
this continue?
Well, for as long as the president deems it necessary.
But you expect at some point that you get a vehicle.
Well, if at some point I get it, that is fine. But as I speak to you, it hasn't happened. And the point is that there are priorities. You know, there are things that you need to do immediately when you come to buy. It does not include immediately buying vehicles and all that. And that is how come we've been able to contain expenditure and spend on the things that matter. Understand me? So education, I was going to talk about education earlier when you intervened. So a lot of money now goes into education. In this budget, 30.3 billion has
more than 30 billion.
4.2 billion has gone to free senior high school, has been allocated to free senior high school for the 2026 financial year. Last year, indeed, between the beginning of this year and now, about 1.3 billion Ghana cedis has been spent feeding senior high school students. And so that is how come you don't hear some of the complaints that used to come up under the MPP. If you go to health, 11 billion Ghana cedis has been given in this budget for 2026 to the National Health Insurance Scheme. Out of it, 2.4 billion Ghana cedis will go to Mahama Cares or the Ghana Medical Trust Fund. Including that 11 billion are funds to start the provision of free primary health care for the people of Ghana so that basic healthcare services are addressed so that the pressure does not fall on larger health facilities. Look at agriculture. Look at the farmer services centers. 50 of them that will be set up. About 680 million Ghana cedis has been allocated. We are currently having a food glut. 245 million Ghana cedis has been allocated to address that. The no fee stress. As of last week, 151,000 students had benefited from the no fee stress as was budgeted for under the 2025 budget. A similar amount is going to be spent in 2026. It has ensured that every first year student in a public tertiary institution has their fees addressed, because that is the most difficult stage for many parents. I mean, if parents cannot afford to pay 800 cedis or 1,500 cedis for the awards at senior high school, for which reason we are implementing free senior high school, how then can it be argued that larger amounts that are paid at the tertiary level are affordable for parents? So I have highlighted this to show you that expenditure is occurring at the right places. And sometimes it helps to make savings from elsewhere in order to ensure that the discretionary expenditure that you spoke about do not exceed limits that will create difficulties for us. So the president is enforcing this. The president believes that our resources must be managed prudently and efficiently. And he has encouraged the finance minister to hold a line and enforce the discipline that is necessary.
In October, on PM Express, the Labour Minister, Dr. Ratification, disclosed to me that most of you haven't received your salaries yet at some point, at least as of October when talking to me. Has that changed?
Well, I believe I started receiving my salary because I'm an MP, so I'm paid as an MP. So that one was immediately after we started working, somewhere around February or March. I know of colleagues who hadn't received their salary as of August, September, but I suspect that has been rectified at the moment. But it's a long-standing problem, though, one that needs to be rectified. It's not just political appointees. Sometimes teachers, nurses, doctors, they get enrolled onto the public payroll, and then for years they've not received it. It's not an acceptable situation in my candid view, and I think that it's going to be worked on so that we don't suffer some of these.
So these non-essential expenditure, vehicle procurements, foreign travels, workshops. But here's the thing: you've been in government before.
Absolutely.
Most government I have seen when they come to power, first year, they tend to show this as their commitment to building the economy back better. Then second, third, fourth year, they completely deviate from what they started. You've seen it before. I've seen it before. And Akufo-Addo, when it came in 2017, we were told no vehicles. In 2018, we saw the fleet that came in. I mean, pardon our skepticism as citizens when we see politicians do this in their first year. How do you address that skepticism? Because we have seen this before in past governments.
Well, it's a valid point. They say that the one that has been bitten by a snake before becomes wary of an earthworm when it runs into it. So it is understandable that people will be skeptical about the sustainability of some of the measures that we've introduced. But that is why experience counts. President Mahama has been in power before. So I can tell you that there are things that he has learned that he is going to abide by to ensure that some of these things are sustained. On foreign travels, nobody can travel under this government without express authorization from the chief of staff.
Have you traveled? Oh yeah, you went to the.
I have. Absolutely. But Tonga, all of that, even for private travels, have to be sanctioned by the chief of staff. And indeed, you saw that the numbers were slashed significantly for the UN General Assembly. The same for COP30 and what have you. So yes, whereas there may be some skepticism because of previous experiences, this is a government that is committed to changing the narrative and ensuring that the old things that we did that affected the way that public finances were managed are done away with, and a new approach is adopted. So President Mahama means business. If there are no cars at the presidency, the immediate thing is not to buy new cars. At some point, cars may come in because it's necessary. It's part of the tools that are needed. But I only highlighted that point to indicate that it's not like that is what President Mahama has been interested in from the get-go. He has been more interested. Indeed, I recall that his first 2 days in office as president were dedicated to addressing problems with feeding senior high school children and addressing the problems that the NPP bequeathed to us in terms of the energy sector. They were not about acquiring vehicles or other luxuries for the use of government officials. So we are committed, even though the skepticism is clearly understood.
Still talking about the budget and fiscal discipline. Are you buying presidential jets worth $1 billion, equivalent to 13 billion cedis?
Absolutely false. Let me explain this carefully so that people do not misinterpret the facts. Indeed, I was reviewing the documents just before you walk in. The Ghana Armed Forces, through the Ministry of Defense, has made several representations to governments about the need to augment their fleets because currently they have aging and broken down aircraft. Indeed, perhaps I should not be saying this, but it's necessary because of the need for transparency. They have only one functional aircraft, as I speak to you, and that is not acceptable by any stretch of the imagination. We recently suffered a tragic helicopter accident, which claimed the life.
Aircraft, clarify. You know, helicopter can be aircraft.
Yeah, the CASA. That's indeed all the helicopters currently are grounded.
All of them.
Yes, they are broken down. Some of them are old. So even acquiring parts for them are difficult because they are no longer in production. The Z9 that crashed there was another one that was in operation, but subsequently has been grounded. There were another 2 that have already also broken down. The Mi-17 helicopters are also not currently functioning because you can't even find spare parts, to retrofit them. So the only one left is the CASA, which does all the things that the military has to do. That is not acceptable. So since we came to power, the Ghana Armed Forces through the Defense Ministry has been making representations and impressing upon government the need to retool them. And it is absolutely imperative. Now, I've heard people attempt to cast defense expenditure in the light of unnecessary expenditure. They say that it is not a priority. Even as I dare say, that security is perhaps the number one function of any government. Every government in the world has the first and foremost responsibility to secure its citizens. We are called Ghana because we have a certain territory. That territory has to have its integrity always protected. So the Constitution sets up the Ghana Armed Forces, whose job it is to guarantee this territorial integrity. Indeed, as I speak to, there's some recruitment exercise to recruit thousands of Ghanaian young people into the Ghana Armed Forces. There are people who are already serving the armed forces. They need tools to work with. And so the army or the armed forces itself has been making these requisitions. And they say, among others, that immediately they need 4 helicopters. Together we call them Eurocopters because they are manufactured somewhere in Europe. They have, when the minister goes to parliament to lay the bill for the approval process, the details will emerge. So they say they need 4 helicopters. They need 2 aircraft, a medium range one and a long range one. And then they need, for instance, they need 2 or 3 large vessels to patrol our territorial waters. They need armored personnel carriers. In fact, the MPP had entered into a deal with an Israeli company to procure 19 of them at a total cost of $80 million. They had paid $40 million. But the company is insisting that they cannot refund the $40 million if we don't pay the outstanding $40 million. And they will not supply the equipment until we have paid, because that's the contract that the MPP signed with them. So it makes sense to add the $40 million to it to acquire the 19 armored personnel carriers. And then the boats. Evans, I can tell you for free, because I've been reviewing the documents. And when the minister comes to parliament, it will become apparent. If you put the armored personnel carriers, the $40 million that is outstanding, together with the 2 aircraft, 1 medium, 1 long range, and the 4 helicopters, it will come roughly somewhere around $300 million. So the claim by Honorable Abu Jinapo and his colleagues in the MPP that we are spending $1 billion to buy presidential jets is patently false. He saw it in the budget and deliberately decided to misrepresent it.
But here's the thing, though. When I read the budget line, it talks about in 2026 you're going to begin procurement.
Yes,
but that doesn't mean that that's where it ends.
Absolutely,
you have a
absolutely,
4-year period.
Absolutely.
So every year there's a commitment.
Absolutely.
And I checked. If you go to the appendix,
yes,
they
call it multi-year budget.
Multi-year.
Yeah. Good.
And you
let me explain that.
You would end that at 13 billion.
But let me explain
by the time that you exhaust the
so to say that we are using $1 billion to buy presidential jets is plainly false, even from what you have said. So there's a multi-year budgeting framework. Recall that the president had said before, indeed, the late Dr. Manibuama, when he appeared at the Government Accountability Series, I think 2 weeks before the unfortunate accident happened, had announced that there's a $1 billion retooling package for the Ghana Armed Forces. So they will buy several equipment which are necessary to ensure that they are able to do their work effectively.
But the outlay is
this year, no,
2026
this year, we are buying 4 helicopters, the 2 aircraft that I've spoken about, and then the armored personnel carriers, and perhaps the 2 or 3 vessels. They don't amount to $1 billion, as Abu Jinapo sought to misinterpret. Next year, there will be another set of equipment, and then in 2028, so 2027, another set, 2028, 2029, until such time that we have what we believe
but when you put
will
all
be adequate.
that together, you get 13 billion.
But that is total defense spending over 4 years. And it is not going to be spent on 2 presidential jets, as Abu Jinapo sought to say.
So, but are you buying presidential jets?
The point is that, you see, the armed forces are also in charge of presidential travel. So the unit that is in charge is called the Communications Squadron. It is made up of the elite pilots and engineers in the Ghana Armed Forces, headed by the Chief of Air Staff himself. Indeed, when the president travels, it's the Chief of Air Staff who pilots the plane, if it is a state-owned aircraft. When President Mahama came to power, one of the first things that he did, because indeed there was a need for travel, you in the media raised the issue about the use of his brother's jet and all that. Now, so he asked the Communications Squadron to give him a report on the state of the presidential aircraft. After a couple of weeks, they came back and said, oh, in their view, it was fit to fly. So in fact, President Mahama used it. We went to 3 countries, Angola, Kenya, and Tanzania. I was on those flights. It appeared that it was working well. When we came back, it was time for another travel. And yet they said, no, the aircraft had broken down. So it had to go to, this was in March, it had to go to Dassault in France for repairs. After some months, they said that, okay, the aircraft was ready.
Recently saw that they've been delivered.
The Air Force pilots got there only to be told that, oh, they've detected further faults, corrosion in the tank, the engines. And so it has stayed in France for 8 months. And it only recently came back. The Air Force has said, and it is in the report that I've referred to that I was studying before you came in, that for operational efficiency, the frequent breakdowns do not make it fit for the purposes that it was intended for. And that they think that over the long term, these breakdowns and the resort to other alternatives are making it too expensive to run. And so we are better off acquiring what they recommend will be medium and long range aircraft so that it addresses the problem. Now, let me also tell you, and indeed, this is in the report, when the finance minister comes to perhaps it will be made public. They indicated, but even when the president rents private aircraft, the Air Force still has to sanction it. The Air Force still has to sanction it. Otherwise, it will not be permitted to fly. Now, the cost of renting a private aircraft, as President Akufo-Addo was saying, was $18,000 an hour. There are times when the president has to be outside of this country for about a week, and it's not convenient to let the plane go and come back because he also needs to travel. Sometimes there are several hops on a trip. If the plane remains in the custody of government for 1 week, that is $3 million. So if the president does 10 of such travels in a year, you're talking $30 million. It is not the best use of resources. So the Air Force recommends, the Communications Squadron recommends that, look, as part of the retooling process, let us put ourselves in a position where we are able to address this comprehensively so that we stop these haphazard, stopgap, unreliable measures that we are adopting. But for anybody to deliberately construe the entire gamut of defense spending to bolster the capacity of our armed forces to protect us, to mean that we are going to purchase 2 presidential jets for $1 billion, it's a blatant falsehood. And that one must be placed on record. It is only a major, and indeed recall that the last time there was a major retooling of the armed forces was under President Mills and President Mahama. That was when the 2 Kasa aircraft were acquired. That's when the 4 Z9 helicopters were acquired, and other aircraft. Since in between that time, the NPP didn't do much. And we have come back, and there's a need. First, the Navy complained about the lack of capacity of their current vessels to enable them to do the work they need to do in the Gulf of Guinea. Indeed, I am aware of instances where we have received credible intelligence from external partners about the presence of some pirates within our territorial waters. They engage in bunkering. They go and steal oil from some place, and another ship meets the vessel and then offloads it. Or they just engage in raw piracy activity. We received intelligence and were unable to intercept these miscreants because we didn't have the vessels to do so. It is not acceptable.
So for clarity,
yeah,
the 1 long range and 1 medium range aircraft will both be for presidential use.
Not just, it's for the military use. Now, remember.
So, I mean, just to clarify, the word presidential jet is a very controversial term in our election.
Evans, you see, the point is that there must be
presidential jets.
Evans, the Air Force, all aircraft used by the president belong to the Air Force. Indeed, the president uses the CASA. I have sat in a CASA with the president on a number of occasions.
Even the current presidential jet belongs to the fleet.
Absolutely. So the armed forces has requested for aircraft that enable them function effectively. If the president needs to travel, they will have one for his use safely, which they control, and whose maintenance and management is more cost effective than the one that they have. So you need to look at it within the context of the general retooling of the armed forces. I'm aware that because the NPP itself came under righteous indignation from Ghanaians because of the way that President Akufo-Addo was renting jets, they are quick. They want to equalize and create the impression that there's some profligacy. President Mahama has never been interested in luxury. Indeed, he could also have rented ultra-expensive, ultra-luxury jets in the absence of the presidential jets, couldn't he? But he's opted for his brother's jet. The only cost we incur is the fuel for his brother's jets. And indeed, I will say it again, I have sat in an economy class aircraft with President Mahama from abroad to Ghana when he was president in 2014. So luxury has never been what defines President Mahama. He has not hankered after it. But when the armed forces of Ghana, the Air Force, constantly make representations to governments about the need to retool in order that they are able to deliver optimal service to the country, I think we need to listen as a government. It has nothing to do with a taste or preference for lavish spending.
One more point on those 2 aircraft, because it's important to put it beyond doubt.
Absolutely.
So 1 long range, 1 medium range. Are these presidential jets?
They are armed forces jets. Air Force jets.
Because you see,
that is what they are.
You can have a pure military aircraft that will deliver
which the president uses. The president uses the CASA. The president has used their Mi-17 helicopters. The president has used the Z9 helicopters.
And then you can have your presidential jets, which is the make is just like what you have on the private jet, which is what we currently have. That distinction is important because I don't want anybody to misinterpret, disinterpret to mean, and you will not like that too. So clarify very specifically. these one long range, one medium range, are these in the mold of what we currently have as a presidential jet, as a Gulfstream?
Well,
or are a pure military aircraft for the purposes of
we don't have a Gulfstream. The last time we had a Gulfstream was under President before.
Yes,
he didn't
similar.
use it.
I'm just using that. So
yes, again, you see, again, he didn't use it for all the 8 years that he was president. And eventually they sold it in exchange for some Chinese simulators or what have you. As I've indicated, the Air Force has said, and indeed it is documented, it's right here on my table. They have said that they need a certain number of aircraft, 4 helicopters, 1 medium range aircraft that can travel, I think, 13 hours non-stop, and then a longer range that can travel 17 hours non-stop.
They need presidential use?
Not just for presidential use. It can be used by senior government officials, it can be used by the president. Even the armed forces, top brass, can also use it. So the idea that somehow the government of the day has prioritized the purchase of 2 presidents is not accurate. And these are not, and the President Mahama has been in power for, 11 months. If he was inclined to, he could just have decided that immediately go and buy a presidential jet. Very first report from the communications squad, we suggested that there were some difficulties with the current aircraft that ferries the president. So the point that I have sought to stress, in order that we beat back on this mischief by the MPP and their surrogates, is that it's not that the president has decided or that it is a priority to go and buy 2 jets. It is a general retooling. It will have aircraft for executive use, which is necessary because the president has to travel. There are alternative arrangements which the Air Force says complicates their work, makes it difficult, and is simply too expensive. And in their view, it is better use of money to acquire these for the purposes that they are required of. The defense minister, who incidentally happens to be finance minister, will go to parliament. And I think before the parliament rises, after the budget approval, and indeed as part of the budget approval process, he will lay it bare, he will lay the facts out, the figures will come out. You will see that we are not spending $1 billion on presidential aircraft. Over a period of 4 years, 13 billion will be spent to buy many things for the Ghana Armed Forces. But I repeat that this year, or in 2026, what has been budgeted for will not exceed or will be in the region of $300 million. That is 4 helicopters, 2 aircraft, and then the armored personnel carriers, and then the vessels that I've highlighted in this interview. So
you mentioned that the defense minister will go. Will we have a substantive defense minister?
Well, that is up to the president. If the president believes that he should appoint another person, I will be more than happy to communicate it to the Ghanaian people. But that is not in my hands.
That's obviously something. Even the Speaker of Parliament had cause to say, we need a substantive defense minister immediately. Well, it is the president.
It is the president who determines. The power rests with the president. If at any point he believes that it is necessary to do so, I'm sure he will.
Has he made a decision yet?
Well, I'm not aware of any such decision at the moment. At least he has not communicated same to me. When he does, I'll be more than happy to share it to the people of Ghana. Yeah.
Felix Kwakye Ofosu speaks for the government. I'm going to take a quick break. When I return, we'll talk about other things. We'll talk about illegal mining. And he's been the foremost mouthpiece in communicating what the Operation 9 Months has been doing across the country. We'll talk about the successes, challenges, and failures since this war started. Stay with me. And thank you very much for staying with us. I'm still here on PM Express with the Member of Parliament for Abra, Sebu Kwamankese, is the government chief spokesperson. We've been talking quite a bit about the 2026 budget. In that budget, there was an allocation for 9 months, and that is government's preeminent agency coordinating the fight against illegal mining. Do you accept, Felix, that Galamsey remains your biggest challenge?
Well, I think that it's been a challenge for a long time. It's not a recent challenge. The truth is that over the period of between 10 to 15 years, this has become a problem. And its intensity continues to widen over the period. So there's certainly the need to push back. I don't think that the previous government did enough. I don't think they showed the commitment that was necessary to deal with it. I think it became apparent at some point that there were vested interests in both the government and then the ruling party at the time in the sustenance of Galamsey. And therefore, that significantly weakened the fights. But this government has, as it were, demonstrated commitment to addressing it comprehensively. And in fact, if you see the budget, you see that clearly. more is being done. I've heard the MPP, I think it was my sister Abena Osiasari, who made the point that she believes that the amount allocated to fight Galamsey was insufficient and therefore was skeptical about government's commitment. I don't think that the facts bear out that position. We allocated 150 million Ghana cedis in the budget to fight Galamsey. Last year it was 50 million Ghana cedis. So this year's allocation is 3 times what was allocated last year. Indeed, a cursory assessment of the 2024 budget reviews that only 2.8 million Ghana cedis was allocated to fight Galamsey. So from a position where we had 2.8 million Ghana cedis to 50 million Ghana cedis in 2025 and 150 million Ghana cedis in 2020, you see clear improvement in the amount of resources that have been allocated to the fight against Galamsey. Even this year, NIMOS has received a number of vehicles. I mean, they received about 30 vehicles or so. I'm aware of an effort to deploy armed men along all the rivers that we have in Ghana
You
and
mean
forest reserves.
Armed forces?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let me clarify.
Basis.
Yes, absolutely. We have permanent bases along the rivers and forest reserves so that the Galamsey miscreants do not return when they are flushed out from one place. And all of that is underway. So it is clear that this government is committed. NIMOS continues to operate on a daily basis. They disrupt the activities of Galamsey, yes. And in the past, people used to say that they were only arresting small fishes and that they were not going after kingpins. They have gone after kingpins. In the last month or so, they have arrested major kingpins, some of whom even attempted to bribe them and all that. They have arrested some Chinese nationals who were involved in it, some of them heavily armed and all that. They have not been compromised in any way, shape, or form. I think that the total number of arrests should be 1,500 people as we speak. The Attorney General has said clearly, and indeed I'm aware, that Cabinet has approved the establishment of tribunals. And one of the main reasons why that is being done is to ensure the speedy trial of persons who are alleged to be engaged in Galamsey. And once that happens, we'll see much quicker justice delivery, law enforcement in that regard. There are also policy interventions like controlling the importation of excavators. And that unless you can show that you are going to use an excavator for lawful mining activity or some other construction-related activity, you will not be permitted to bring in an excavator. And to do so, you need rigorous certification. A rigorous licensing mechanism has been put in place, which includes monitoring of excavators that come into the country. So wherever there is an excavator in this country, we'll be able to see on the dashboard what activity they are engaged in. And if you use it for any activity other than what you've advertised, or you go outside of the territory where you said you will use it, it can be disabled as source. So all these are being done. The infamous LI 2462 is now history. It became LI 2501 after the portion where mining leases could be granted to entities to mine in forest reserves was repealed. But that didn't appear to be enough. So the main law itself has been struck down. It will be replaced by a more robust set of laws that does not include
mining forest
reserves, and that's away with some of the more disagreeable aspects of the whole discussion. That also is being done. The Attorney General has given indication that even the Mining and Minerals Act itself will be tweaked to make it more robust in its ability to help fight against Galamsey. So a lot is being done.
There's a lot being done because you can see it, but it's always about the outcomes.
Sure.
And as far as Galamsey is concerned, my subjective view is the way to measure outcome is lookatability, for example, because it gives you a clear sense of where it's happening. Because if the water is not improving, lives in your constituency, in central region, is heavily impacted by that. Are you seeing these outcomes to correspond with the effort that you've just talked about?
First of all, whereas stability is an extremely worrying matter because it affects the quality of water and all that. It's not the only metric, I should say, that you use to assess the impact of the work of NIMOS and other agencies engaged in beating back on Galamsey. You can look at forest reserves, for instance. When we came into power, out of 280 or so forest reserves, 44 had been impacted by Galamsey. 9 were under the firm control of Galamseyers and armed thugs. As we speak, that is no longer the case. The state has reclaimed those forest reserves. So if you assess that strand of activity, you see a clear gain that must be highlighted, even as we continue to make efforts to improve the fight in areas where we have water bodies that have been polluted. Even in those water bodies, there are some where we've recorded significant improvements in the levels of stability because of the constant work that NIMOS is doing to disrupt the activities of Galamsey. So the fight is by no means won, but I believe that the figures and the evidence shows improvements in what has happened over the years.
And we expect is in the forest reserves.
Oh, I think that one is a clear improvement. There's no doubt about
and
it.
The stability?
If 9 forest reserves were under the control of non-state actors, and now the state has firm control and has flashed out these misfires. People who have even attempted to go back have also been apprehended and are being dealt with. That is clearly again to be highlighted. And the stability levels are definitely worrying. They are not acceptable.
Because Ghana Water Company,
and it is the reason. And it is the reason why. It is the reason why government has, for instance, said that they have been declared security zones, no-go areas, and that the Ghana Armed Forces are going to deploy men there permanently.
We're told this.
Oh, it is something that
happen yet?
It is something that will be rolled out very, very soon. In fact, even before that, the Blue Water Guards, for instance, indeed, only last week.
I mean, the Blue Water Guards is
not the case. Not the case. Again, you need
Blue Water Guards.
Listen.
Evans,
you see, Evans. NIMOS cannot be everywhere every time.
But definitely no Blue Water Guards.
If you let me land, it is part of the effort to keep a constant watch over the water bodies. So you need a mechanism to be able to detect the presence of persons engaging in Galamsey even before NIMOS strikes. The armed forces will be deployed along these river bodies as a permanent solution to ward off persons who want to engage in Galamsey. But even then, they will still need to work in close collaboration with other agencies so that there is coordination in the way that this activity is. Ghana is a vast territory. Our river bodies cover wide expanses. And so you need permanent eyes and ears watching over them in order to trigger responses that need to be implemented when persons engaging in Galamsey strike. So the water guards serve a useful purpose in keeping watch over this. Nobody is saying that they are the ones going to confront the armed thugs. But it is not always the case that people engaging in Galamsey are armed. So there are instances where the Blue Water Guards on their own have been able to fend off these Galamseyers. But for the most part, they are the eyes and ears of the state in terms of monitoring what is happening. And if it is necessary to call in additional support by more, if you like, suited state agents, that is done. So let us not dismiss the Blue Water Guards as some non-entities. They are playing an important role. In fact, almost every NIMOS action that has taken place along the river bodies have been in close collaboration with the Blue Water Guards. So they are doing a good job and they need to be encouraged. Indeed, more of the Blue Water Guards are going to come on stream. Last week, I'm aware of some recruitment efforts. We know we promised that by the close of this year, a total of 2,000 Blue Water Guards would have been deployed. About 1,200 of them had been deployed in the earlier parts of the year. So by close of the year, that 2,000 target to be met. And they are playing an important role. You can check the records. Anytime I post the activities that NIMOS engages in along river bodies, you find that the Blue Water Guards play a significant role in detecting the activity and alerting the appropriate authorities to respond, even as effort is made to increase the presence of armed forces along the river bodies.
Last year, you're on record to have said that dealing with Galamsey is straightforward.
Yes, it is. I still maintain
Do you still stand by that?
I stand by it. What I meant is this. You see, when you have law enforcement agencies, you have an armed forces, you cannot throw your hands up in despair and say that you can't fight Galamsey. The point I made when I appeared on Newsfile that day was that there was governmental complicity at the time. There were indeed Professor Fimbo Abuatim, who was a very person picked by President Akufo-Addo himself to lead the fight against Galamsey, compiled a report in which he was emphatic that there were people in the Akufo-Addo government, there were people in the New Patriotic Party who were actively engaged in Galamsey. I surmised that it was because of that what should be a straightforward fight. When I say straightforward, it means that you tackle it wherever it rears its head, as we are doing. But that was not the case. Look at the amount they allocated to the fight against Galamsey in 2024, 2.8 million Ghana cedis. This does not show commitment compared to a government that is allocating 150 million Ghana cedis. And so we saw it. Indeed, since we've been in power.
But if it's straightforward, you should have dealt with it by now.
But we are dealing with it. When I say straightforward, it doesn't mean that you will win it overnight. That's not what it means. It means that there's a certain activity which you should undertake that was not being undertaken by the previous government. That is being undertaken now. Indeed, when the Akonta mining matter popped up, you were in the media. You were vocal in highlighting that particular unlawful activity. President Akufo-Addo frontally defended Akonta mining. Indeed, he declared them innocent of any wrongdoing. As of 2022 or thereabouts, we are aware of investigations that showed clearly that Akonta mining and others were involved in illegal mining. It's on the basis of that report that I speak to you, Chairman Woon, to me, and 3 or 4 others have been charged. So look at the difference.
I mean, but based on your actual hands-on experience,
sure,
which aspect of the fight against illegal mining have you found to be straightforward?
Deploying the might of the state and being willing to use the might of the state against anybody, irrespective of their standing in society. That's what I meant. Today, Chairman Woon, to me, who was a very powerful figure under the MPP, who could not be touched, who the president vouched for, despite evidence to the contrary that he was engaged in this activity, is standing trial with 4 others. There are people in the NDC who have been mentioned who are currently under investigation. And if it is ever found that they are actually engaged in it, the same action taken against Woon, to me, will be taken against them. That is what I meant by it was a straightforward fight. That was lacking under the MPP, headed by President Akufo-Addo. There was no political will, because as Professor Frimpong Boateng pointed out, they were complicit. They were part of the problem and therefore could not possibly be the people fighting against it. That is what I meant. And I stand by it to this day.
I want to take you to your constituency.
Sure.
Because of something that the Lands and Natural Resources Minister did, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago. The Ewoya Lithium project.
Yes.
From what I understand, Mankasim, which is...
It's not my constituency, but it's close.
It's close.
I even suspect that there may be some deposits in the as well, but that is yet to be
how alive
explored.
are you to the... Because in the last 2 weeks, the people there have been talking a lot about how they were looking forward to this taking off, Parliament ratifying it. There were a lot of jobs that they were looking. The local economy was going to be reliant heavily on it and its ability to take shape. But they haven't seen anything. They encouraged the government to act on it. Government seemed to have acted by taking it back to Parliament for ratification. I mean, as a member of Parliament, with this very close to you at your doorstep, how alive are you to?
Oh, I am. Indeed, I receive representations from the chiefs and people almost every day about the need to hasten the process. That is precisely what government is doing. There has been some issue regarding taking the agreement back to Parliament and varying some of the conditions. The issue is simple. The initial projections that were made under the MPP, which informed that particular agreement, were based on some projections on the world market price of lithium. So every investor that is going to put some money into a project will look at how much would accrue. It is standard, normal, fair practice. Now the price of lithium has fallen significantly over the period. So the same projections cannot hold. It affects the ability of the investors to raise the needed resources to be able to invest in the project. So if the investor is going to come, we definitely need to do something about the conditions. So we have simply said that instead of the 10% royalty, let's make it 5%, because the amount of money that will be coming in will not be enough to justify the investment if you maintain it at this. I think it is fair, it is proper, and it's the right thing to do. There are some of the varied conditions that are dependent on what happens in future. So for instance, there's some taxation element that has been deferred pending an improvement in the world market price of lithium. Once the market price begins to increase, those commitments will be met. And some other things that have been put in there. So the MPP, as usual, has attempted to distort this and create the impression that we have gone back on some word. But nothing of the sort has happened. It is the reality of the situation, which requires some tweaking of the agreement in order that the positive aspect of the project is realized, because it will benefit the people of Mankesim and its surrounding areas. It will benefit the Ghanaian economy as a whole. And that is what we remain committed to.
Are you confident that it will be ratified before Parliament rises?
I believe so. I believe it will be ratified, along with other bills that are pending before Parliament.
So you said that you had some representation. I believe the chiefs had.
Oh yes, I mean on a daily basis I receive for instance, on my end of the Abura traditional area constantly engages me on the matter. There's another chief at Yamransa who constantly engages me on the matter. Indeed, I've had visitations from them to this very office.
Oh, they've come?
Absolutely, to highlight the importance of that project to them.
So what do you tell them now?
Oh, I think that
what do you say to them now that the thing is gone?
Listen, government is committed. Government is committed to ensuring that we take advantage of any natural resource that we can explore for the benefits of the people of Ghana. That is a given. I believe every government that we've had has had the same commitment. So the project is one that government is committed to rolling out in partnership with the investors, except that these things that I've highlighted needed to be done in order to make the project viable.
Which is what you've done.
Which is what we've done. In the new but it was important to clarify that it is not that suddenly we in the NEC have woken up and decided that we will slash the royalties, which was initially pegged at 10%. There has been a significant drop in the world market price of lithium, which does not make the investment viable in its current state. To make it viable, we need to tweak it a bit. Once things improve, the other aspects of the project will kick in. It will be restored to reflect a fair, if you like, arrangement between government and the investor. That is what that has happened.
So for all those chiefs who have been coming here and visiting you, you can tell them that you're confident that before Parliament rises in December.
Yes, I don't see any stumbling block unless something unforeseen happens. I don't see why we should not be able to.
All things being equal,
all things because I expect that it will be
ratified.
It will be ratified. Yeah, it will be ratified. If the processes are currently ongoing and Parliament has its own timetable and schedule, as far as I know, there is no major stumbling block to this happening unless something.
And once that is done, how quickly do you expect Atlantic Lithium to begin?
Well, I think that it will depend on their state of readiness. It depends on how quickly they're able to mobilize. Again, all things being equal, because there are things that can happen to affect this. But if everything is in place, as of the time that the agreement is ratified, I see no reason why within a reasonable time frame, they should not be able to roll out.
I mean, thanks for the clarity on that, because we've been running a series 3 weeks ago on Hope and Pause. If we wanted to understand,
you see, that is why it's important
what has happened since the fanfare and euphoria.
It is important why it is important,
and the community was really agitated.
Yes, that is why it is important for you in the media to go beyond the headlines and the claims that politicians make, to delve into the issues. You see, government functions in a way that we consider everything before we take it to Parliament. So Cabinet, the apex decision-making body of government, is briefed. The minister has to make a case, has to justify before his colleagues.
He did?
He has done that. And we've considered all the pros and cons.
And Cabinet gives him the
absolutely, because we saw that what he was doing was right, it was fair. Nobody is being shortchanged. It's not that suddenly we decided to slash royalties so that the investor benefits. That is not what has happened. The investor has taken a hit because of a change in the projections that underpinned the initial agreement. So you just need to tweak it in order to make it viable, so that the objective of ensuring that the people of Ghana, especially those within the catchment area of that activity, benefits is realized. That's what has happened. Yeah. And when the minister went to Parliament and laid the bill, it was all in there. So any opposition MP seeking to critique it must take on board all the explanations given in the document before Parliament. But often they don't do that. They just rush to the microphone to make some noise in order to create the impression of some wrongdoing when there's none. But if you take your time and go through the agreement, you will see exactly what the minister sought to do. And it was all in the interest of Ghana.
I mean, just before we wrap up, today there's a press release by this Joseph Blangsing Dumaji, who claims that they've sent a petition for the removal of the EC chairperson and others. Is this something that's come to the presidency?
Well, as I speak to you, my checks show that we are yet to receive it. Normally, it will go to if it is addressed to the president, it will go to the secretary to the president. I've engaged him. He has not cited it yet. But I'm sure that if he cites it, there's a process, a long standing process that this goes through, and any information on that will be conveyed to the public.
Before this one, is there any other?
I'm not aware of any other petition. At the very least, I don't have a briefing that there's any other such petition. But if such a petition exists and it comes to the attention of the Secretary to the President, he will alert me, and the public will know. In the same way that the Chief Justice became a matter of public commentary because we put it out first. Of course, respecting the constitutional processes, same thing will be done if indeed such a petition has come to the presidency.
That hasn't been the practice in the past, where the government takes the active step of constantly updating us when. What changed here?
Because you see, there's a need for transparency and accountability. We hold this office in trust. 10 months ago, I was not the one doing this job. It was somebody who was doing it. So it's not a position that we own. We pass through that position for a brief moment. Whilst doing that, we use the mandate and resources of the people of Ghana to execute our roles. The same people need to know exactly what we are doing with their mandate and resources. So if somebody has slapped in a petition about any public office holder, it is only fair that we tell the public that this is what we have received. This is the defined process for dealing with this sort of thing. And this is what has been done. That's all that we sought to do. So that people don't just wake up one day and find that the Chief Justice has been removed when nobody knew how that started in the first place. So it is purely in the interest of transparency and accountability that we keep the people informed. Of course, within the confines of the law, so that we don't do anything that violates the law, because we are not required or we are not allowed to do that as a government.
And yes. Just on the subject of this international community and how it relates to Ghana,
sure.
I just seen an announcement that the U.S. government has rescinded a certain 15% that they had imposed on some exports of ours. And I think it's the Foreign Affairs Minister who announced this. Yes. How did we manage to secure this?
Well, I think that ever since...
Because we know Trump, he's transactional.
Well, so, of course.
So if he gives you anything, you must have given me something back.
The point is that ever since those tariffs and other steps were taken by the U.S. government, which affected us, the Ghanaian government has taken the step to engage them, to negotiate and ensure that to every extent possible, we lighten the impact of these sanctions. Or in the best possible scenario, they are reversed. I think that we've made gains in that regard. The one that involved the review of the duration of visas from 5 years to 3 months, we managed to get it off the table. Now the 5-year visa has been restored. The one that imposed some tariffs on selected exports, only today the minister, as you indicated, has announced that they have been reversed. There's one on agua, which is currently under negotiation. We expect that all things being equal, that one too will go very well, as the discussions point to. Now, it is the duty of the government of Ghana to seek the best interests.
What did you give?
Well,
in exchange.
Again, as far as I sit here, I don't know that anything specifically has been given beyond negotiations. Now, the point is that
Trump
Ghana
is known for the Christmas.
Well, but the point is that
his administration follows his.
Well,
nature.
you may have your views about the Trump administration, as anybody will be entitled to do. But the point is that as a country, we relate to countries. Over the years, we benefit from countries. They give us help. If at any point they require us to also do something for them, which is not against our interest as a country, there's no difficulty, in my view.
Did you accept to receive the deportees in exchange for these?
Well, I wouldn't say that it was a direct swap. The point is that...
But it was an element.
The U.S. government made a request that there are these deportees that they want to transit through our country. So we did an assessment and said that, first of all, ECOWAS citizens are allowed to go through Ghana for a period of 90 days. So if these are West African nationals, we are more than happy to receive them, except that there should be no record of crime standing in the name of any of them. If we find that there's any criminal record, then you are obliged to furnish us with that information. If we find that they have committed a crime, we will not accept them. But if they are West African nationals, they are already permitted by virtue of the protocols that we've entered into as an ECOWAS country to come to Ghana. The same way that you can go to Nigeria today and spend 90 days and come back and go back. You can travel from the US to Nigeria with your Ghanaian passport and they will accept you because you will be within your right as an ECOWAS citizen. That is all that. When they made that proposal, we did the assessment, gave these conditions which they met, and we found that there was really nothing wrong. It was not going to undermine our interest in any way.
But he's dropped Ghana's name. I saw an international report today. I believe the NBC, a report that shows a woman who I believe is Sierra Leonean who was deported to Ghana and was dragged up. There's a video that.
Well, law enforcement officials
and Ghana's name is out there today.
Oh, I'm not sure that.
I'm not sure that you must be. You were the chief government spokesman.
Well, I did.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that report?
I've had some international journalists have reached me.
Yeah.
For responses.
That must give you cause for concern. That
well, of course. Let me indicate that the government of Ghana respects the rights of all citizens and all people who are currently within the territory of Ghana, whether they are foreigners or Ghanaians. Fundamental human rights are things that we respect. So there's no policy to mistreat anybody, be they Ghanaian or foreign. Law enforcement officials, however, have the right to enforce the law in the way that they deem fit. Sometimes in doing so, there will be a few who may be overzealous and overreach. Other times too, it is necessary to apply some level of force in order to enforce the law. So for instance, if you have to remove a foreign national from Ghana, and the person is offering some resistance, you may be compelled to use a bit more force.
Someone offering resistance?
Well, the brief I have is that they did what they thought was necessary in order to bring the situation under control. They didn't set out to violate anybody's rights. And I've explained to the foreign media who have gotten in touch with me that is the position of the government of Ghana. There's no policy of mistreatment of anybody. We do not condone it. Indeed, when other countries do it to our nationals or any other nationals, we condemn it. So we are not going to condemn that kind of behavior. So I need to place on record that there's no policy to mistreat any deportee or anybody at all who is within the territory of Ghana.
But the person has been sent back to Sierra Leone now?
Well, I would have to check on that. I do not have a briefing yet on the subject, but if I find out, I'll be more than willing to share it with you.
Felix, thank you very much.
The pleasure is all mine, Evans.
And that there is the Chief Government Spokesperson, Felix Kwakye Ofosu, addressing a host of questions that I know you had. And that is PM Express tonight. Enjoy the rest of your